You are 34 years old, you run a newspaper called El Faro del Norte, and you haven't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days because you're sitting on the biggest story the city has seen in 20 years. The paper has 6 employees, a press that jams on humid days, a circulation of 4,200 in a city of 800,000. By every measure, you are already finished. What you don't know yet is that someone is counting on that. You grew up in this building. Your grandfather started the paper in 1974. Your father kept it alive through the worst decades, and when your father's heart gave out from 30 years of low-level terror, the doctors called it chronic sympathetic activation. You called it what it was, you took the keys. You inherited the desk, the press, the photograph of your grandfather on the wall, and the rule he drilled into you at age 11. A newspaper that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable isn't a newspaper. It's a press release for whoever is in charge. So you make people uncomfortable. That's the job. The story starts with a cartel lieutenant named Vargas, who has been taxing every vendor in the central market. Protection fees collected every Tuesday in cash in broad daylight. You have photographs, receipts, 2 vendors willing to go on record, 2 out of 13 who spoke to you, because the other 11 looked at you with the specific fear of people who understand exactly what going on record means in Culiacan. You publish the story on a Thursday. By Friday morning, a man in a dark gray suit is standing across the street from the building, not doing anything, just standing. He's there Monday. He's there Tuesday. He doesn't need to say anything. His presence is the sentence. You go to the police. The officer takes notes, tells you they'll look into it. The man across the street disappears the next day. 2 weeks later, you learn your source had his windows smashed. A week after that, a flower arrangement appears on your doorstep. No note. Your grandmother's favorite kind. This is how Culiacan communicates, not with threats you can print. With gestures that mean everything and prove nothing. But here's what you notice. Nobody touches you. No one follows your car. No one calls your phone. The flowers were the last message. And then silence. You should have asked why. Instead, you chase the bigger story, because there's always a bigger story, and yours falls into your lap 6 months later in the form of a man named Remigio. He finds Sofia first. Sofia is your best reporter, 29 years old, grew up in Tierra Blanca, came back to Culiacan after journalism school because she said someone had to. Remigio says he's a cartel accountant, says the current leadership is bleeding the organization dry, says he has documents, bank accounts across 14 cities, shell companies. Proof that the top boss, a man called El Arquitecto, has been skimming from his own lieutenants for 4 years. He wants it published. Says he came to you because you're the only paper in the city that prints the truth. You should have asked why he came to you. You ask yourself that now, at 3 a.m., too late. You spend 4 months verifying everything Remigio gives you. Cross-referencing account numbers against property records. Matching shell company names to addresses. Sofia drives to 3 different cities to confirm. The documents hold up every time. The numbers are real. The accounts are real. El Arquitecto is real. A man who built an empire, and according to everything Remigio hands you, has been stealing from the people who built it with him. The lieutenants don't know. The street soldiers don't know. Only Remigio knows. And now you know. And the story is extraordinary. You don't stop to think about what kind of person has access to this level of financial detail. You don't stop to ask why an accountant who is afraid for his life would come to a newspaper with a circulation of 4,000 instead of disappearing to Tijuana. You don't stop to ask why, in a city where journalists get flowers left on their doorsteps for printing a story about market fees, no one has touched you in 6 months. You publish at midnight on a Wednesday. You send copies to 3 national papers simultaneously because you're not naive. You know how to make yourself expensive to silence. By 6 a.m., the story has been shared 14,000 times. By noon, it's national news. By 3 p.m., the Federal Attorney General's office issues a 2-page statement announcing an investigation. 3 agencies. El Arquitecto is named in an official government document for the first time in his career. You sit at your grandfather's desk and you feel something you haven't felt in a long time, like you just hit the exact thing you were aimed at. Sofia calls you at 4 p.m. Her voice is wrong, not scared, confused. She says, I've been going through Remigio's documents again. The routing numbers on the Panama accounts? They're not El Arquitecto's. They're registered to a holding company she's seen before in a different context, connected to a different name. A lieutenant, a man called El Carnicero, the butcher. El Arquitecto's second in command, the man who, according to 3 separate sources she's now calling urgently, has been positioning himself to take over the organization for 2 years. You stare at the wall. You ask her what she's saying. She says, I'm saying Remigio didn't leak to us because he was scared. He leaked to us because we were useful. We just published a story that destroys El Arquitecto, using documents that were constructed to point at El Arquitecto. We didn't expose the cartel. We ran a smear campaign for the man who wants to run it. The room is very quiet. You look at the grandfather's photograph. You look at Valentina's crayon drawing pinned above your desk. Mi papa trabaja, a little lamp, a little desk. You think about every vendor who spoke to you on record. Every source whose name exists somewhere in your files. Every person who trusted that El Faro del Norte prints the truth. You printed the truth. That's what makes it so clean. Every number Remigio gave you was real. Every account was real. El Arquitecto really was stealing from his lieutenants. El Carnicero made sure of that. Had been engineering it for 2 years, building a paper trail that only needed a journalist to light the fuse. You were the match. You were always going to be the match. El Carnicero just needed someone honest enough that people would believe it, and desperate enough not to look too hard at why the story arrived gift-wrapped at their door. You call Remigio's number. It's disconnected. You call the intermediary Sofia used to make first contact, also disconnected. You search the name he gave you in every database you have access to. Nothing. The man who spent 4 months feeding you the most important story of your career does not exist. By Thursday morning, El Arquitecto is in federal custody. By Friday, 2 of his lieutenants are dead. Not arrested. Dead. In what the police report calls an internal dispute. By Saturday, El Carnicero gives a single brief statement through a lawyer, saying he welcomes the investigation and will cooperate fully with authorities. He sounds like a man who wrote his own indictment and already knows it clears him. You sit in the building where you grew up, and you try to locate the moment you stopped asking questions. It was before the market story. It was before the flowers. It was probably the day your grandfather died and you decided that the paper surviving was the same thing as the paper mattering. You needed the big story so badly that when the big story walked through your door, you treated your own desperation as due diligence. Sophia comes into the office on Saturday afternoon. She sets a folder on your desk without speaking. Inside, everything she has on El Carnicero. Account records, property records, the holding company, the 2-year trail of engineered evidence. The real story. The one about how the most feared cartel in Sinaloa just used a 4,000 circulation newspaper as a murder weapon, and how you handed them the trigger because you were too hungry for the truth too. Notice you were being fed it. You look at the folder. You look at her. You ask if she's sure she wants to keep going. She says, we already printed the lie, now we print what actually happened. You ask what that does to the sources who trusted us. She says, it's the only thing that makes it right. You open the folder, you start reading, and then you start writing. You name yourself in the first paragraph. You explain everything. Remigio, the routing numbers, the holding company, the 2-year trail El Carnicero built while you were busy feeling like a hero. You don't soften it. Your grandfather's rule was always precision. Don't hide behind extra words. So you don't hide. You publish on Sunday morning. By noon, the comments are coming in, not the ones you expected. The first wave says you're making it up to cover your own failure. That the original story was solid, verified, sourced, documented, and now that the cartel is pushing back, you're suddenly claiming you were manipulated? Convenient. The national papers that ran your story on Wednesday are not running your correction on Sunday. One of them publishes an op-ed by a media critic who says El Faro del Norte appears to be engaged in damage control after facing pressure from criminal elements. He doesn't name the pressure. He doesn't have to. The implication is that you buckled. The Federal Attorney General's office does not comment on your Sunday story. They are busy with the investigation your Wednesday story triggered. The investigation built entirely on documents that Remigio gave you. Documents that are real. Documents that point exactly where El Carnicero wanted them to point. The investigation is proceeding beautifully. From El Carnicero's perspective, you just tried to blow it up and nobody listened. El Carnicero's lawyer releases a statement by Monday morning. It is 3 sentences. It says El Faro del Norte's latest publication appears to be a desperate attempt to undermine a legitimate federal investigation on behalf of criminal interests. It says the paper's credibility must now be seriously questioned. It says El Carnicero will not dignify further commentary from a publication that has demonstrated it cannot be trusted to distinguish truth from cartel propaganda. Read that again. El Carnicero, the man who ran you like a puppet for 4 months, just publicly accused you of being a cartel mouthpiece. And the comment sections believe him. Because from the outside, the sequence of events looks like this. A small struggling newspaper publishes a bombshell story about the cartel boss, gets massive attention, then 4 days later publishes a story claiming actually the whole thing was a setup, right as the federal investigation gains momentum. It looks like someone got to you. It looks like exactly the kind of thing a cartel does to a journalist who published something they didn't like. The 2 vendors who went on record for your market story stop returning your calls. 3 of your 6 employees get job offers from other outlets in the same week. You don't know if that's coincidence. Sophia stays. She's the only one you're sure of. You look at each other across the newsroom on Tuesday morning, and neither of you says what you're both thinking, which is that El Carnicero has now done something much more elegant than threatening. He's made it so that anything you print going forward will be read through the lens of a journalist who either got played by the cartel or is working for them. He doesn't need to put a man across the street. He doesn't need flowers. He just needs people to not know which story to believe. And in a city where the cartel is the only institution that never publicly contradicts itself, a journalist who contradicts himself twice in 1 week doesn't stand much of a chance. El Arquitecto goes to trial. The evidence holds. He's convicted on financial crimes 18 months later. El Carnicero attends the sentencing as a witness for the prosecution. He shakes hands with the federal prosecutor on the courthouse steps. The photograph runs in every national paper. He looks like a man who helped bring a criminal to justice, which, technically he did. He just made sure the criminal was someone else. You watch all of it from the building where you grew up. You still have the paper, you still have Sophia. You still have the photograph of your grandfather on the wall and the press that jams on humid days, and Valentina's crayon drawing above the desk. You publish every week. Local stories. City council votes a water main in Tierra Blanca. The kind of reporting that nobody weaponizes because nobody powerful enough cares. People in Culiacan still read you. But when they share your stories, now there's always a comment underneath. Someone asking, isn't this the guy who said he was manipulated by the cartel? Someone else saying, I don't know what to believe with this paper anymore. And that's the thing about credibility. It takes years to build and 4 days to make complicated. You don't lose it all at once. It just becomes a question mark that follows everything you write, every source you cite, every story you tell. Was this real? Or is he being used again? How would we even know? El Carnicero never threatened you, never sent a man to stand outside, never left flowers. He did something you never thought to defend against. He made you the most useful journalist in Culiacan, let you do your best work, and then left you in a position where your best work and your worst mistake are permanently indistinguishable to everyone. Reading from the outside. You sit at your grandfather's desk, and you think about his rule. A newspaper that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable isn't a newspaper. You made El Carnicero very comfortable, and he made sure the whole city knows it, even if they don't know that's what happened, even if they never will. That's the city. That's always been the city. And you're still in it, still printing, still the last honest journalist in Culiacan, except now nobody's quite sure what that means anymore, including some nights, you. That wraps it up for today. This story is fictional, but the use of media by criminal organizations to eliminate rivals and discredit journalists simultaneously is documented across Mexico and Colombia. The most dangerous play isn't a threat, it's making you the story. If this one hit different, drop a comment and tell me the moment you realized El Carnicero was always 3 moves ahead. Subscribe for more, see you in the next one.